The guardrails were covered in claw marks, fresh ones. I saw them in the wash of my headlights as the road curved and the fog thickened, the metal flashing pale and wet before dropping back into shadow. At first, I thought they were shadows, branches dragged low by wind, stains left by old collisions. Then the angle was wrong, the spacing too regular. The marks caught the light and held it, edges sharp enough to throw thin lines of brightness back at me. I slowed without meaning to. The engine's hum dropped, and in its place the night pressed closer, heavy and damp. This stretch of highway hadn't seen traffic in miles. The last taillights had vanished behind me a long time ago, swallowed by the same fog that now rolled in low bands across the asphalt. Broken streetlights stood at intervals, their poles leaning slightly, some dark, some flickering weakly as if undecided. I pulled onto the shoulder and cut the engine. The silence that followed was immediate and wrong. Not empty, restrained. Even the fog seemed to pause, its movement slowed to a cautious drift. Somewhere far off, metal ticked as it cooled. My own breathing sounded too loud inside the car. I got out. Cold air slid under my jacket and found my skin. It smelled of wet concrete, old leaves, and something faintly metallic. The guardrail ran along the edge of the road, curving away into the mist, its surface beaded with moisture. Up close, the marks resolved into something unmistakable. For parallel grooves, each as wide as my finger, carved deep into the steel. They ran at a slight downward angle, starting high and dragging lower, as if whatever made them had leaned in with its weight. The metal around the cuts had been pushed inward, not torn, compressed. Freshness showed in the way the exposed steel gleamed beneath the thin film of rain, unoxidized, bright. I followed them a few steps along the rail. They repeated at irregular intervals, sometimes clustered, sometimes spaced farther apart, as if the thing that made them had paused, adjusted, then continued. The depth varied subtly. Some gouges were deeper, the pressure heavier, like a test. The fog shifted behind me. I turned, heart-kicking, scanning the road. Headlights didn't appear. The highway stretched empty in both directions, its white lines fading into gray. Beyond the shoulder, the treeline loomed, dense and black, branches overlapping into a wall. Shadows moved there, not fast, not slow, just enough to suggest rearrangement. A sound carried through the fog. A scrape. It was distant, softened by moisture and space, but the texture was unmistakable. Metal on metal. Deliberate. Not the random shriek of wind-blown debris, but a controlled drag, followed by a pause. I stepped back toward my car, boots crunching softly on gravel. The guardrail beside me bore another set of marks I hadn't noticed before, these angled upward, climbing. They stopped abruptly, as if the claws had lifted free. I tried to tell myself it was maintenance equipment. Plow. A chain dragged loose, but the spacing was wrong for machinery. Too organic. The marks curved slightly at the ends, as if the claws had flexed. The streetlight nearest me flickered and went out. Darkness closed in, thick and immediate. The fog glowed faintly with ambient light from somewhere unseen, flattening distance until the world felt close and shallow. In that dim, the treeline seemed nearer than it had been moments before, the edge of it creeping forward without moving. Another scrape sounded, closer now. Came from the opposite side of the road. I crossed quickly, my footsteps sounding louder with each step, the gravel shifting underfoot. The guardrail there was newer, its surface smooth and unblemished, except where it wasn't. Fresh grooves scored the metal in a long, continuous drag, starting low and rising, as if whatever made them had pulled itself upright. I placed my hand near one without touching. The air around it felt colder, the metal radiating a chill that had nothing to do with the night. A drop of water slid along the groove and fell, the sound too clear in the quiet. The fog thinned just enough for me to see the ditch beyond the guardrail. The grass there lay flattened in a narrow path that led into the trees. Not trampled, pressed, as if something heavy had passed through without breaking stride. A low sound rolled out of the forest. Not a growl, not a roar. It was breath, slow, controlled, measured. It carried the cadence of something patient, something accustomed to being unheard. The sound bent as it traveled, sliding along the guardrails, echoing softly from the concrete supports beneath the road. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The sudden vibration made me flinch, adrenaline spiking. I pulled it out with shaking hands. No signal. The screen dimmed, then brightened again, reflecting my face back at me in the glass. For a moment, the reflection seemed delayed, my eyes blinking a fraction of a second after I did. The fog shifted again, and I realized with a sinking certainty that it wasn't random. It was parting. A shape pressed against it from within the treeline, not fully emerging, just enough to disturb the air. The branches there bowed outward slightly, leaves trembling without wind. Something tall stood just beyond the reach of the light, its outline suggested only by absence, space where the fog thinned too cleanly. Another scrape sounded, right behind me. I spun. The guardrail at my back shuddered softly, vibrating under a weight that hadn't been there before. Fresh grooves appeared as if drawn by an invisible hand, the metal screaming faintly as it yielded. The marks stopped inches from my shoulder. I didn't run. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me understood that sudden movement would complete a pattern already in progress. The streetlight flickered back on. In its brief, sickly glow, I saw the claw marks extend along the rail in both directions, converging on the spot where I stood. Above them, just at the edge of the light, the metal bore a different kind of impression. A broad, shallow dent, as if something had leaned close to look. The breathing sounded again, no longer distant. It came from the road itself, from the fog just ahead, where the headlights of my car cut a weak, trembling tunnel. The sound matched my own breath perfectly, inhalation for inhalation, exhalation for exhalation. When the light went out for the last time, something shifted behind the guardrail, and the metal creaked under a grip that had finally found purchase. My windshield wipers turned on by themselves. Even though the sky was clear, I noticed it first as a faint vibration through the steering column, subtle, almost imperceptible, like the hum of the tires on asphalt, only sharper. I blinked against the glare of the dashboard lights and the orange cast of a distant street lamp, and when I did, the wipers began to sweep across the windshield. Slow at first, almost deliberate, back and forth, back and forth. There was no rain, no mist, no condensation. The glass was clear, cold, and dry under my fingertips. I killed the wipers. The stalk didn't resist, but the motion persisted for a heartbeat longer than it should have, as if reluctant to obey, before jerking to a stop. I rubbed my eyes, blaming fatigue. The highway had been empty for miles, a ribbon of black asphalt bordered by scraggly woods and the occasional, flickering construction light. My drive home had been routine, uneventful, until the moment I noticed the dashboard clock. 1:16. I started moving again, cautiously, scanning the road. The wipers remained silent and still for 30 seconds, then began again without prompting. Back and forth. The blades squeaked faintly on dry glass, the sound unnerving in the still night. The highway was deserted, not a car in sight. I could hear the soft hum of the tires, the occasional pop of gravel against the undercarriage, and the gentle vibration of the engine. Even the radio seemed muted, static creeping in with each station search. Outside, the world was perfectly still. No wind, no fog, no rain. Just the muted orange glare of lights and the shadowed treeline pressing close to the pavement. I tried to focus on the road, telling myself it was a malfunction. Electronics fail. The wipers had an auto feature. Maybe some glitch had activated it. Logical explanations were scarce comfort as the sweeps continued, predictable and deliberate, brushing across the windshield in a steady rhythm. It wasn't chaotic. It was intentional. Then I noticed the reflections. Every time the blades passed over the glass, I caught glimpses of something beyond the ordinary. Shadows shifted unnaturally at the edge of the trees, bending around themselves like smoke caught in a draft. A branch that had been leaning left now leaned right, just slightly, then returned to its original position. The undergrowth along the shoulder seemed subtly rearranged, flattened in narrow lines, like something tall had passed just beyond my vision. The wipers weren't just clearing the windshield, they were drawing my attention to the patterns forming in the dark. I tried switching the wipers off again. The stalk moved freely, the mechanism disengaged, but the sweep returned moments later, as if the car itself had decided it needed them. My pulse quickened. The world beyond the glass felt too far, too pliable. The road beneath me was unchanged, yet every glance through the blades made me feel the distance elongate, the trees pressing closer. I drove slower, shifting to the right lane, letting the wiper's rhythm dictate my pace. Each pass highlighted the highway's imperfections. Small cracks in the asphalt, reflective markers bent slightly out of alignment, construction cones leaning, and the streetlights above flickering out of sync. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet cumulative, enough to make me question if I was imagining it or if the night itself was responding. A faint sound began to emerge, carried beneath the steady vibration of the tires and the intermittent hum of the engine. First a scraping, then another closer. My eyes flicked to the shoulder. Gravel shifted. I could see it in the reflection, a shimmer across the darkness just beyond the trees. It wasn't movement as I knew it, but something bending the world in slow, deliberate arcs. The wiper's sweep revealed the shimmer for a moment, then erased it, leaving the road empty again. I forced myself to breathe evenly, trying to ground myself. Logic clung stubbornly to the idea that it was stress, fatigue, maybe the fog rolling in patches I couldn't see yet. I focused on the headlights cut through the night, the white paint stripes that narrowed and widened as the road curved. Yet, with each pass of the wipers, the reflections grew stranger. I saw eyes, not at first, just glimmers, tiny, faint, almost like moisture reflecting orange streetlights. But they moved with the rhythm of the blades, appearing, disappearing, appearing again further along the roadside. I blinked deliberately, and when my eyelids opened, the eyes were closer. There was no shape, just reflection. No face, no figure, yet the alignment was perfect, as though something in the treeline was learning how to track me, how to occupy the space just beyond perception. My fingers gripped the wheel tighter. The wipers slowed slightly, then accelerated, each sweep a heartbeat in the night. I realized I was following their rhythm rather than controlling it. My pace matched them, my attention trapped in the narrow band of the windshield. The road curved sharply, a downhill stretch framed by overhanging branches. I saw the reflection again, closer now, larger. Not entirely human, not entirely animal. It was leaning just beyond the trees, elongated in the way darkness stretches. Its eyes caught the wiper's motion and adjusted with it. I couldn't tell if it was waiting or learning. The blades swept, and the shape flickered. I thought to pull over, to stop entirely, but the instant I considered it, the dashboard clock blinked. 1:17. Time itself seemed to pulse, then skip. When I glanced up, the road ahead shifted subtly, a curve tighter than I remembered, trees bending inward, the shoulder narrower. The wipers revealed a new section of treeline that hadn't been there a moment ago, as if the night was breathing around me. A low vibration thrummed beneath my seat, different from the tires. The engine idled steadily, but the hum carried an undercurrent, a resonance. Something moved alongside the car, invisible in the night, yet perfectly in sync with the wipers. Each sweep revealed a hint, a distortion in the reflections on the wet paint of my hood, a shadow that vanished the instant the blade passed. I slowed to a crawl. The wiper's rhythm became my only anchor. The air inside the car grew heavier, warmer, as if the presence just beyond the windshield pressed against the glass, measuring me. My chest tightened. Every movement outside was deliberate. The highway stretched on, unending, yet the treeline leaned ever closer. I blinked. When I opened my eyes, a pair of reflections had appeared on the inside of the glass. I wasn't sure at first what they were. My own eyes, perhaps, but the second pair wasn't mine, smaller, darker, perfectly still, tracking me. My heart hammered. The wipers passed over them again and again. They didn't move. They didn't blink. They waited. I took my hand off the stalk. The wipers continued. The radio clicked, then fizzled to static. It was the only sound that broke the mechanical rhythm. In the white noise hiss, I thought I heard my name whispered, carried on the same timing as the blades. I jerked the wheel slightly. The road stretched unnaturally ahead, the lane lines bending under the reflections of the wipers, then snapping back into place as if nothing had happened. I drove faster. The wipers accelerated, keeping pace with my panic. Ahead, the headlights illuminated a curve in the road I didn't remember. The treeline closed around it. Shadows stretched from the edges of the asphalt, thin and angular, moving without wind. The reflections on the windshield began to shift in impossible ways, layering over each other, creating depth that wasn't there in reality. I realized then that the wipers weren't clearing the glass. They were exposing it, revealing what was watching, what had been waiting, what was learning the contours of my attention. A third reflection appeared, faint this time, in the passenger side. Smaller than the other two, impossible to place, like a figure crouched just beyond the world I could see. It moved with the wiper's sweep, perfectly synced, perfectly deliberate. I wanted to blink, wanted to look away, but every time I did, the reflections grew closer, sharper. The shapes pressed against the glass as if testing the barrier between inside and outside. The road stretched on, straight and endless. The wipers moved faster now, sweeping rhythmically, mechanically, unnaturally. I could feel the night pressing against them, guiding them, teaching them. The reflections tracked me. They multiplied, one for each sweep, layering, watching. I realized the headlights weren't cutting through the night anymore. They were illuminating the presence. Every drop of moisture on the glass revealed a fragment of something just beyond visibility. Waiting. I reached forward to turn the wipers off again. They didn't respond. The stalk moved freely, but the blades didn't slow. And then I understood. It wasn't the wipers moving on their own. They had always been obedient. I was the one trapped, forced to watch, forced to blink at the world as it rearranged itself outside the windshield. I drove on, unable to stop, unable to see beyond the reflections. Every sweep revealed more of them, and I knew. I could feel it. That with each pass, they were learning, memorizing, waiting for the moment I looked away. The fog thickened. The night pressed close. The wipers continued. And I could see them now, just behind the glass, waiting, patient, unseen yet perfectly aligned with every motion I made.